Because I was moving. I can move it, yeah. You want me to? Okay.
Give me a minute. On you when you're ready.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and kick off. Hello, everybody online, too. We're here with Heather Johnson with New Mexico Bank and Trust, who is our sponsor for this Money Smart for Small Business series. We are in class 8. Wow. This is our 8th session, and it'll be banking services today. And then, of course, this is a monthly session, so we will be back August 17th with our next session, which will be credit reporting demystified. So that will be, again, here at the Bioscience Center, same time, same place. So we'll kick it off to Heather.
Great, thanks. So as Misty mentioned, I'm Heather Johnson with New Mexico Bank and Trust. Today we're going to be talking about banking services, and since we're kind of a small group, there's lots of opportunity for questions. And Nick, they can ask questions online too, right?
Yes.
So feel free to ask questions on the Facebook page as we go along. So we're going to try and demystify banking services today and really look at it from a different aspect. When I learned how to be a personal banker, I sort of learned to look at the bigger picture and then funnel the way down into what exact products and services you needed. And as a business owner, I think taking that tack before even going to the bank to look at how you're using and managing your accounts before you even stop in to discover what services are right for you, so that then you can kind of put the pieces together between what the bank is offering and what you need. And so you can kind of have that thought in your mind. So we're going to go through some of those questions in that funnel process today, and then we will talk about more specifics of different banking processes. Estrella is one of our branch managers, and she can open accounts, and so she also has a lot of expertise on what different products offer. So as we're going through today, if you have specific questions, feel free to ask about different things. So in your participant guide, as always, there is the pretest. Kimberly already did it. If you just want to look at it real quick and take a look and see sort of what you think you know before you come in today versus what you do know, and I'll give you a minute to look at that. So one of the first questions, and it's on page 6 of the participant guide. Oh no, 7, as we talk about business banking fundamentals. And the first question is, what do you need? And I think a better way of phrasing that question is, how do you use your checking account? There are sort of, you can break down banking into sort of some major big categories, like I said, sort of that funnel process. How do you pay people, either your employees or your vendors or other companies you work with? How do you receive money, either from your customers or other vendors? How do you protect yourself from fraud and other situations? And you can kind of put all banking products into sort of those 3 basic areas. So if you think about how do you use your checking account and how are you going to manage your business in those 3 areas, you can kind of then start to pick your products and sort of decide what works best for you. So how do I pay? How do you pay your employees or vendors? Do you use a checkbook? Do you pay cash? Do you pay via a payroll service like QuickBooks? How do people give me money? Are you going to accept credit cards? Are you only going to accept cash? Are you going to accept checks? There are risks in accepting all of these different sources of payment and understanding those risks. And so sort of diving into how does my business work and what would be the most efficient way for me to receive those payments. How do I protect myself? So that's things like, how do I download statements and transactions to be able to reconcile? How am I going to protect my checks if I'm going to use and write checks from somebody stealing them out of my drawer? If you're at a workspace where other employees are there, you don't want someone to be able to come in. If you have cash, how are you going to keep it on hand? How are you going to store it, count it, and also do you need to take it to the bank every night? So then that takes into account, do you need a bank that's close to you? Do they have a night drop box? Are you going to be doing it via the ATM? Those are all things then you start. If you're accepting cash, that makes a difference too. If you're accepting checks, are you going to drop them off nightly? There's a new product that we're going to talk about called remote deposit capture, or some of you know you can take pictures now on your phone of checks and deposit it. Are you going to be able to do that and use that in your account? So is that something that's important to you that you want to be able to have or not? So again, understanding how you're going to accept payments and receive payments versus then you can start thinking about what banking products make sense.
That's been a big question for me.
Okay.
How am I going to take in the money? Because if a couple calls and says to me, will you marry me? And I say yes, and they say meet me at this place, and I charge $400, I don't want to check. Because I don't want to worry and play a game with them or the bank that we know. I'm out with this couple and they're witness, and I'm all alone, and they're handing me a wad of cash. How safe am I in this place? Or even from that place to the next place.
Right.
And what would be the easiest, most safe way of, not everybody's going to have cash. Some are going to have to use a credit card or ATM. Then what do I do? So that's been a major question, because all the couples in LA that I married just flat out handed me cash, but they picked me up and drove me back to where I was staying at the time too. So that fear of, oh, I have a lot of cash and now what, didn't enter my mind. But here I'm all alone, strange places. What could happen if someone saw an exchange of $100 bills over there and then decided to bump me on the head?
So there are some credit card ways you can accept that aren't like a big merchant service process. Some that come to mind are PayPal, the Square, which hooks up to your phone. So those are some different options that you can research that aren't as fee heavy or as equipment heavy, that you don't need to invest in a lot of machines in order to do.
Somebody suggested PayPal, and I went online a while back to look it up, but it said you had to start your account, and I didn't want to start anything just to get information. So I was hoping other people would be able to kind of fill in the blanks for me with that.
I can't talk a lot about specifics about the program, and I don't know. I just know it's an option, and there's certain fees that you can do.
We use it here without the little swiping device, and I think it's like 3% for the fee on it.
Okay.
And you can, the customer can either go into their PayPal and send it directly from their PayPal to your PayPal, or if you have it set up to take credit cards, they'll send you a little swiper in the app and do that for you. So.
How do I get my money? I don't understand that.
They deposit it into your account.
Your bank account will be linked to PayPal, and they send it.
Oh, okay.
So then that's another thing about bank services. So that's considered in the banking world an ACH deposit, where PayPal deposits the funds in. So when you're talking to your bank, ask them if they charge you to receive ACH transactions, or if you get so many free per month before they start charging, those types of things.
Okay.
And the other service was Square.
Square, I don't know if you've seen it. It's a little white device, although now they've changed it because it accepts chips. So it still hooks up to the phone, and it's a little white device, and you put the card in, and it sends it via your phone. And then they send a text message or an email to the person who utilized it. And the same thing, it deposits directly to your checking account. So, and that's again an ACH deposit in.
And that's what I see a lot of the small business owners.
Yeah.
The Square is not as expensive, and you get the credit card right there and then they pay you, and you don't have to carry that.
Yeah, I know lots of people in LA that use the Square, and it's just a little thing that, well,
It's
Yeah.
linked to your
it's just stuck in like the headphone thing or
Yeah.
something on your phone.
So thinking about how people will pay you, and then going back to how will you pay people? Are you going to write checks? So then where are you going to store those? And thinking about banking, is there a per check fee that might be charged, or how is that going to work? And of course the fee, checks are not cheap to purchase. So that's another fee for your business if you're considering writing checks. There's also ACH transfers where you can transfer money directly between companies, usually through online banking, and that might be another fee. So thinking about how you're going to pay people. And a lot of companies for small banks, for small businesses, they'll just allow you to do a few ACH a month at no charge.
What's ACH?
An automatic clearinghouse where they sort of electronically move funds from your account to their account. So thinking about how you use. So how do I protect fraud and employee fraud or external fraud? Again, keeping your checks under lock and key is one way. Reconciling your bank statements. So how are you going to be able to access your funds? Are you going to look online to do that regularly? Receive a bank statement? Those are all questions to ask. And we'll go into this. And then another thing to think about is, do I need money? And that's one of the questions that's listed. And being upfront and talking with your bank, I'll be honest, a lot of small startup companies, banks have a hard time giving money to. But talking about as you grow and your business develops, what do banks look for small business lending? Those are questions you can ask. So that down the road, you know, they look at my credit score and deposits in the account and those types of things before doing lending. Yep.
Is your personal credit score different than your business credit score?
There is a business credit score, but typically banks put much more importance on your personal credit score. So, turning the page, choosing the right bank. So now that you've figured out what services you need or might be looking for in the general categories as you consider your business, so choose the right bank that works for you. So do you like the customer service when you walk in the bank? Does it make you feel good? This is probably one of the biggest nominating factors of different banks, is who you're actually working with. Who is the person at the counter that you're going to be dealing with, in the personal banker or the commercial lender? You want somebody you're going to like and trust. How accessible is the bank? If you're depositing lots of cash, I don't think you want to be driving across town with all of that in your car. So you want something that's going to be close. Does the bank meet my needs, and what are the costs? Costs are a factor. But there's a lot of different services and different ways to avoid fees if you know what you're looking for. And is the bank FDIC insured? Right now the limit for FDIC insurance is $250,000 per depositor. And we're going to talk a little bit more later in today's workshop about what exactly that is per depositor. But there's also a really cool calculator online that I use all the time. I don't know about Australia, but as bankers, it's
Yeah,
It's-
the one in the Google
Yeah,
and the Gov. the
FDIC.gov,
Yeah.
and they can help you. You put in your personal situation, and they, I mean, without like all your personal data, but you say, I have this amount of money, and I'm at this bank, this many banks, and they tell you whether or not you're protected and how that works. And it's a very nice calculator that they've come up with at FDIC.gov.
You can't have $55 million and it's all covered?
Nope.
Oh, come on.
But there are ways to help increase and that kind of thing. So let's start with the most basic products that you'll get at a bank, which is a checking account. And this is on page 9. There's kind of two categories of business checking accounts. There's sort of a simple small business checking account that a lot of times is free, but not always. It limits the number of transactions you can do. This is for small mom and pop, small solopreneurs that aren't having a lot of transactions come through, kind of, you know, more thinking it's very similar to a personal checking account, like where you have that sort of level of transactions. And then you have a larger commercial checking account, which are for people who are doing a lot of transactions on a month-to-month basis, who are sending out wires, who have a payroll with 50 employees, who just have a little bit more demands that they need for their checking account. And typically on those, there's different fees that can be offset based on balances, and it's a much more kind of per transaction versus the smaller checking account. It's just kind of a flat rate, flat fee sort of situation. It is important to know when you're looking at business checking accounts that the liabilities that you assume, the government has certain protections for consumers that say you're not liable for these transactions. On your business account, it's kind of different. There's a point in there that you should check with your state, but many states have adopted the Uniform Commercial Code, which generally holds the banks, not the account holder, liable if someone forges a signature on the check. So that goes back to the bank. But that doesn't mean that you could never be liable for those types of losses. So it's just important to know these types of things as to what you're liable for and what the bank is liable for if something happens on your account that wasn't meant to. And that's the same with credit cards and debit cards too. If somebody steals your business debit card, the liabilities are typically different than on a personal debit card or credit card. So moving on to page 10, or at the bottom of page 9, a very important point is always, do not mix your business and personal transactions. Some people like the ease of having their personal banking account at the same location as their business account, and Misty's sort of nodding her head here. And that is good that, you know, they're right there and you can do all your transactions, but it's also then a lot easier to mix and mingle, and that's bad. So it's important for bookkeeping reasons that you keep the transactions separate. So if that means you need to bank at a different place so that you better manage that and keeping that separate, then that's something to consider. If you know you'll be good and everything will be separate, then have it all at one place for ease and developing that relationship. So it's very important not to commingle. We've talked about that a lot in various classes.
Everywhere I've been for help with starting the business, everyone has said that.
Yeah.
So
then one of the other services that is very common that people need from their bank is payroll. Banks offer payroll services. Typically it's through your online banking service. It just depends. Sometimes if you're only paying 2 or 3 employees, there's a very simple payroll system you can use via your bank's online banking. If you have more, there's other online services like Intuit that does payroll. And then there's also local companies like ADP or other companies that are third-party vendors that provide payroll services. So there's different places you can go depending on your needs. The nice thing about the payroll service, you might think, well, I only have a couple employees, but it really helps you calculate what those W-2 wages are. It helps you file everything on time. It helps sort of keep you down the straight and narrow without kind of losing your path. I find payroll very complicated. So it's probably not as complicated as I think it is, but in my mind, having
like
somebody else do that or help me do that, then it's a lot easier.
It sounds like a huge benefit that I didn't know banks did.
Mhm.
I had no clue.
Yeah.
But those companies who offer the payroll service, the nice thing about it also is that they're up to date with the state laws
Mhm.
and the federal laws. So if there is any changes that you have to deduct or add or subtract, they will be right there for you.
Oh,
And
awesome.
you don't have to worry about
Mhm.
wondering what's going on.
And depending on the service, they will actually file your reports for you with the government. So that's a nice feature
Do all
too.
banks do that or just some?
It's not necessarily the bank, but it's the companies.
There's both. I mean, it depends on. This is something you would want to ask as you're looking around at banks if they offer it through their online banking.
You mentioned Intuit, and what was the other one?
ADP. I feel like there's another local one too that I can. Paychecks.
Paychecks are kind of like ADP here
Mhm.
local.
Oh.
Some
So
banks.
it's nice to have somebody face to face.
Yeah. And some banks will offer too that your employees get free checking if the business banks with them, then all the employees get free checking, and then that also helps too because of direct deposit, and you can set that up easier for your employees.
Is there a minimum amount of employees? Because I'm looking at one assistant when I get really busy marrying everybody. Before,
Usually,
I grow that much to
no.
more. Okay. Awesome.
And as you grow more, there are other products to help with cash management because obviously you want your cash as quick as possible, and then it's not that you want to pay as slow as possible, but you want to manage that cash so that it's coming in quickly and everything. So there are other cash management tools, like if you have a payroll account, what a lot of people will do will set it up so that it keeps a zero balance in the payroll account, and then it pulls the funds automatically from the operating account if someone comes in and cashes the check. So that way you're always keeping as much cash as possible in your operating account. A lot of people like to have payroll accounts separate because then that checking account number, if it's on the bottom of checks, it's not the operating account number that's floating out there, it's a payroll account number. So there's less access to the bigger pot of money. So that's called a zero balance feature when you have funds sweeping back and forth from different accounts where you keep a zero balance in one and all of your money in a primary account. Some people do their taxes that way in addition to payroll. Other people I've seen where they might have a foreign transaction or wire account where they happen to receive payments from other companies and they don't want to give out their wire number as their regular checking account number. So they have a separate account just for wires to receive payments from their clients. So those are some other things. There's also something called Lockbox and Positive Pay. Lockbox is where you have somebody send all of your pay, like all of your receivables to a P.O. box. I'm trying to blank. So to a P.O. box, and then the bank actually processes those payments for you. So like consider your like a doctor's office that receives a lot of checks. Rather than processing all of those checks and writing down the amounts and doing it, the bank receives all the checks, runs it through the account, and then sends the doctor a statement saying these are all the checks we've received for these accounts. And that's something they don't have to do. And then also to protect yourself, there's something called Positive Pay where you send the bank a list of checks, and then they verify that those checks are accurate. So some other things that down the road as your company grows to consider and think about. So then after you have a checking account, then you can start thinking about a savings account or certificates of deposit. These are very similar to a personal savings account. You have a limited number of transactions. A certificate of deposit locks your money up for a certain time frame that you can't touch it. Maybe you want to do this because you're saving up for a large piece of equipment, or you're saving up for a down payment on an office building, and you want to set those funds aside, or a big improvement to your business. It's always good too to have a reserve just in case on rainy days. So
How long do they hold your money?
It depends on a CD. It can be anywhere from 6 months to 5 years, just depending on what you're looking for.
Okay. So there's different plans for those. And if you go in to talk to someone at the bank about starting one of those, they would be able to say, well, this is your business, and you're telling me you want to buy a construction thing that costs $1 million within 2 years, so you need to save this much, and you need to not access it for this amount of time. So do this CD?
Right.
They will help with that?
Yeah, they should. A good banker will.
Okay.
A good banker will sit down and educate you on all of those things.
Awesome. Cool.
So then savings accounts are pretty basic. So moving on to account access. This is pretty important. How are you going to access your account? How are you going to look at it to see what's happening? The biggest tool right now that everybody uses is online banking. You can pull up. Yes, I believe so.
Deposit insurance and
Nope.
Nope.
Page 13.
Page 13. Oh, that's funny. You have like one little paragraph, and I have like a whole page.
Okay.
So, online banking is the biggest, easiest way to access to see what's going on in your account. And it's important that you check it regularly to help prevent fraud, to see what's happening on your account, and to reconcile. If you do write checks, just like your personal account, you want to make sure you go in and verify if the check's actually been cashed, then take it out of your balance. And if it hasn't been cashed, then you should still take it out of your balance so you know how much money you have. So, and online banking can help you do all that. It's also a place you can go in and set up a lot of those other services that I talked about, like payroll or direct deposit or ACH. Through your business online banking, those are some services you can set up. So it's usually different. If you do your banking, your personal banking and your business banking at the same bank, you're going to have one login for personal because there's certain features and benefits that your personal account's going to get, and you will have a separate logon for your business so that you can access the business. And the two usually don't go together. And there's different features you can access from the business, and there's different features you can access from the personal. So they keep them separate.
I've been afraid of doing anything like that over a phone or any other device. Because I don't trust that system is going to be that safe.
To verify or to open?
Well, to have out there in the world of criminals, let's say.
Okay.
Leave your phone in the bathroom at a restaurant and go off, and somebody comes in and picks it up, and they have access to your whole life, right?
Well, I mean, there's give and takes to everything, right? There's a certain amount that you're right, that online banking's on your phone, so then they have that access. Yeah. But when you sign into online banking, you have a PIN and you have an ID that you need to get into. Banks spend a lot of money to make sure people don't get into your account. So they're gonna do the best that they can to protect it. Nothing's foolproof, but they're gonna do everything they can. Putting a code on your phone, so if somebody gets a hold of it before you even get to the online banking, that helps too. So then there's a couple steps that somebody has to get to. Again, nothing's foolproof, but the convenience and ease versus the risk, you gotta kinda weigh it for yourself. Now that you have a computer at home, you can, when you have access to internet, you can log in that way too.
And I would feel safer on that than I would my phone.
And so everybody has a comfort level.
Yeah, and you don't have to, they give you the opportunity to have easy access through the phone, but if not, you just use your computer computer.
I've seen kids do their phone at Starbucks. I don't even do that.
Well, now you can call in
yeah.
with phone banking too, right? 'Cause then
Yeah.
you have to talk to
Yeah.
somebody and enter your information. And
You can call in, verify your accounts and transactions too.
Oh, okay.
So that's another option.
Because when I'm a bazillionaire, I want my money protected.
That's right. And banks spend big bucks to do that. So,
Okay.
oh, and remote deposit capture. I don't think you all have an extra bullet point, but I wanted to talk about that. And that's where if somebody pays you with a check, you can run it through a scanner at your office rather than going to the bank, and it goes into your account automatically. So if that's something where you're going to be accepting a lot of checks at your business and you don't want to go to the bank, then that's a nice feature that you can get, is remote deposit capture.
Is that where the commercial on TV shows a guy taking a picture of a check?
It's very similar to that, yeah.
Okay.
And a lot of this used to only be a business product, and then they started using it on personal accounts too, where you can take the picture. And so it's kind of, yeah, it's evolving.
And see there, my mind goes to not safe. Picture on phone, somebody takes phone, they know your whole world.
We usually take it through the app, so it's not sitting on your phone. It's sitting on the bank.
Oh, okay. Oh,
So you don't upload the picture yourself, you take it through your bank's app.
oh, okay.
To the online banking that you have.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you have an online app,
Mhm.
you hit the app, and then you take a picture of the check, and it shoots
Right.
right through the bank system.
Right,
So it's not just,
it's sitting on your phone.
okay.
Once it's deposited in the account, then you can destroy the check.
Okay.
Make sure it's deposited first. And there was no problems with the check or nothing like that.
Okay.
So now we'll go through FDIC insurance demystified.
What page are we on?
You are on page 15 now.
Okay.
Oh, and there's also business debit cards.
Yeah,
Let's
that's
skip debit cards.
and merchant processing.
Do you guys, oh, well, let's go through that. It doesn't, oh, that's after me, so. Do you guys have questions about FDIC insurance and how it works?
I didn't know their amount was so low. I thought everybody that plopped money in the bank had it covered.
No, it's $250,000.
Well, how does Trump take care of all those bazillions he has? How are those insured?
Probably they aren't.
Oh,
He's at a risk that if a bank goes under, he could lose money.
okay.
Typically what happens a lot of time is a bank is sold before it goes under. That's what happened during the last recession. So the FDIC insurance didn't kick into place, the bank was sold and somebody new came in and opened. That's a lot of times what happens. But still the FDIC insurance is important. The one thing I'll say about FDIC insurance is, again, if you have your personal accounts and you are a sole proprietor doing business as, then your personal accounts and your sole proprietor accounts are considered one, and your FDIC insurance is the same for both of those. The sole proprietorship is not separate. So if it's a corporation, it is a separate entity, and then it has separate insurance
It's different tax ID.
with a different tax ID number. But if you're a sole proprietor and everything's under the same social security number, then your FDIC insurance is $250 for both your personal accounts and the business account together.
Wow.
So a total of $250.
Yes. Now, if you're a corporation, then you get $250 for yourself and $250 for the business.
So if I do the LLC, then I can have,
Yes,
Two.
two.
I can earn 250,000,
Mm-hmm.
and that'll be protected in my personal, and the business can have 55 million, but only 250,000 will be protected.
Yes.
Do you recommend getting an LLC for a small business?
There's a lot of protection an LLC provides, and we did a class about different organizational types, and I'll bring you that book, sort of the benefits and cons of each one. Sole proprietors are easy to set up, but there is a lot of risk that you personally take on if something happens in the business. And an LLC provides you a little bit of separation of your personal assets and your business assets so that you don't have that liability risk personally.
Well, I've been all hot to trot for LLC for years in doing my research, but the attorney at FatPipe last month when he did his talk in the afternoon, it's the first time I've ever heard this, and everything I've read or looked at, he said if you put your business in an LLC, it doesn't necessarily protect you separately from a lot of lawsuits, and you can't pay yourself from the business. You can't pay yourself. And I'm like, it's the first time I've ever heard that, and I've talked to several attorneys on the subject. So I was like, that's the first time I'd ever heard that.
So when you're trying to decide what type of organization to set up, you might have a chat with an attorney.
Yeah.
There's office hours where they provide attorneys for free that you can have a discussion with them.
Is that a place or a thing?
It's through, help me out here. It used to be at the Epicenter, which is now on Gold, at the old art bar. And it's every Wednesday.
I think so.
They do office hours where you can talk with an attorney through the city. The city provides it.
And I think they've changed the hours to evenings. That way people who work during the day can go in the
come.
evening.
Okay.
So it's like late afternoon, evening time.
Okay.
It's called workspace.
No, it was through the Epicenter.
Episode.
And it's just called Entrepreneurial Office Hours.
I've heard of that. What else goes on there?
They have accountants there too, don't they?
Yeah, they have attorneys, accountants. They have a variety of people that come in and basically volunteer their time to give free advice every Wednesday. So
Kind of like this.
God bless you all.
So that's the important thing to know about FDIC insurance.
Okay.
And again, go to the website to use the calculator because it's confusing and that calculator does a good job of explaining.
Cool. Okay.
And something else banks can do, I'll just talk about quickly, is set up a retirement account for you as well, or employee benefit accounts where they can have retirement accounts too. So that's another service banks can set up. As you get your $55 million, you'll be wanting to put some of that aside into your retirement.
A lot of it can be donated and what have you, but yeah. That's, I don't know.
Banks
why
can
I
help you
settled
with
on
that too.
number.
So other banking services, business debit cards. So I talked earlier, typically debit cards are most often issued in the name of the owner. Sometimes you can set up an authorized person to have a debit card. I'm not sure I recommend that course of action, but you can do it. And like I mentioned, federal protections are different for consumers versus businesses. So federal law provides many protections to consumer holders of debit cards, such as limitations on liability if a card is lost or stolen, but not business account holders. So if your debit card's lost or stolen, the liability is different. So you want to find out about that at your bank when you're opening an account, or think about that before you even get a debit card. You don't have to, it's not required. So these are important things to understand. And of course, if you lose or misplace your debit card, is always call them automatically to get it shut off. Mm-hmm. And again, this is something that helps if you have online banking. You can check to see if somebody is using your debit card. And also, just so you know, debit cards have daily limits. So you can only spend so much per day, and you can only take out so much cash per day. If your business is gonna, you're purchasing a $2,000 piece of equipment that you normally wouldn't purchase, you might want to call your banker and say, hey, I'm gonna have this large transaction go through, I need you to approve it. And the bank will decide if that's appropriate based on your balance or not, and let you know. And they can temporarily sometimes raise your limits,
Or
just
you can go to the bank
depending.
and take the cash.
Yep.
Yeah, sure.
Get a cashier's check.
Do
I'm
most
not
banks
big on
have the
retailers.
option to notify you when a transaction's over X amount of dollars? I know one of our accounts has that feature. I didn't know if it was like kind of a standard, but it's kind of nice, you know, if it's like
I
over
think-
$5,000, they tell you or something.
I'm not sure that all banks have that.
Oh, okay.
Some banks do. It's kind of a nice feature, but other banks. Some banks have it sort of the reverse. If your account balance hits a certain dollar amount, they'll also notify you. And you can set that dollar amount depending on what it is you want. So kind of, I guess, at both ends of the spectrum.
Okay.
But is that something that's important? Then ask. And then merchant services, we talked about. There are different ways you can accept payment. Banks often sell merchant services for our clients, and that's how you accept payment, like the Square. Something else to consider, which I didn't really realize was part of merchant services, but if you want to offer gift cards for your company, those also is a feature that merchant services will set up. And so they sell those gift cards and help provide the software to send all of those out.
Okay.
So on, you have a discussion point where you can go in now that we've sort of talked about some different things and fill out what you know you need now based on sort of what your idea is, what you think you're going to need in the next 6 months to a year, and in 2 years when you have your $55 million, which services do you think you're going to need? And so if you want to take a moment to sort of look at that table and think about that for a moment, we'll give you some time to fill that out.
I'm still like, I don't know.
Well, it sounds like you have some ideas about whether or not you want to accept credit card and how you want to handle cash. So that's something to consider for now. Are you going to take checks, or it sounds like you've kind of eliminated that because
Does anybody do
your
check
services?
anymore?
They do.
Surprisingly,
they?
yeah. I
Really?
do.
I haven't
Most of
seen
our business
anybody
is
write a
checks.
check.
And normally when you start a business, I mean, you wanted to go back for that something basic. And then as you grow, like Heather said, then just change it. And most of the business will upgrade your checking as they go at your request, of course,
Okay.
or when they charge you.
Right,
And
as
then
you start
come back
noticing
and
your
say, "Why
fees.
do you charge me? Because you're doing too much of the, let's upgrade you to the next level."
Okay.
So,
Okay.
in your case, since you start a business, will be like the basic right now.
Okay.
Do you think you'll need online banking, or maybe you don't feel comfortable using that, so that's not an important feature when you're shopping for a bank?
Right now, no, still too afraid of it, but once I learn, you know,
Mm-hmm.
And
more
then-
technical stuff, maybe I'll get comfortable.
Yeah, what the people do is if you have online banking to look in the system, they eliminate the paper statements.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have, you heard the news yesterday, they were stealing out of the mailboxes,
Oh, yeah.
and so you don't want your data be floating around in the mailbox. So everything, most of it is electronic now.
Yeah, okay. I see where that's gonna have to be the
As the world
kind of, yeah.
And as you get an assistant too, something to consider, you can have your assistant log on to online banking, but you can also put certain restrictions as to what that person can do. So you can set restrictions on online banking to say, Susie can have access, but all she can do is look to see what checks have cleared and what the balance is. Or Susie can have access and send payments to these vendors. Or Susie can, it's kind of up to you, but that provides some controls, but also frees up your time to do other things.
I know that's
So, but then you also want to go back in and reconcile your bank statement to make sure Susie isn't sending herself more money than she's supposed to. So thinking through all of that, what is your checks and balance on the other end to make sure that Susie isn't going to have more power and control.
Right.
So,
Okay.
Personally, I find with online banking, with bill pay,
mm-hmm.
the check that's generated does not have your checking account
Information.
number.
right.
So there's a protection there.
Mhm.
Whereas, every time you write a check, you're giving people
putting
your
all-
account number.
Mhm.
90% of our payments are probably through bill pay. But and that's a way to limit access too, because then you can give access to bill pay only to your employee, but not
Right.
to the full bank account, so they don't know all your balances and they can't wire money your, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can pay bills and send money, but you can't do anything else.
Yeah.
But there's a learning curve, and it does take time to generate a check and all that, or to set it up. You have to type in the address and account number. But it's not terrible, but it just does take.
Okay.
And after that, it's
Yeah, and the bank will hold your hand and actually help you to set it up. Because once you set up, the next month you just put the amount and it's there.
and if they're recurring payments, then you can set it up automatically to recur. Although I don't trust that. I haven't had good experience with it, but maybe that's my bad.
I'm not a fan of reoccurring because then I forget. And then all of a sudden it's out of my account. I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
I forgot
like
that
to do
payment.
Well, online
I
pay
like
if the
to do
money's
it
not in there.
myself. Or maybe
It depends.
put in the day if I
Yeah.
need to be on vacation and I wanted
And
to pay this day
the
and
timing.
I don't have to worry.
Gotcha.
Then I put in a head date instead of just doing it instantly. That's the nice thing about it. But
Can
I
you
don't
change
like
it monthly as
Yeah.
your needs change? Like
I
in
mean,
January, you didn't know that in April you were going to the Bahamas for a month. So January, February, March, it's paid. You do it, and then you can tell the system next month. These
Yeah.
days, computer pays. Okay.
Another handy
Well,
feature.
you're paying it manually every month. The only difference is instead of putting the 15, you choose in the calendar to pay at the end of the month
Right,
because you're
okay.
going to be out of town. That's the nice thing about it.
You can also easily look up the history. So let's say you subscribe to Bridal Magazine or whatever, and then you get another notice. Well, did I pay that already? So you can look there, and it gives the history right away.
Oh, okay.
Some are nice and tell you, hey, you paid this exact amount a week ago. Are you sure you want to pay it again? And I'm like, oh,
Cool.
sweet, I already paid it.
Yeah.
I don't have to pay it again.
I've also found it useful when vendors say they didn't get your payment and the bank provide you confirmation that it was sent. And a lot of the times if they didn't receive it, the bank will say, okay, we'll cover your late fee or whatever the case may be. So it's kind of nice that way too.
Right. Sort of provides that extra protection.
Okay. Cool.
So did you guys sort of think of some services that you might need as we go? We kind of talked.
Well, I'm thinking take credit card, debit cards. Oh, cash and PayPal, I guess. I don't know. I'm still looking into that. And then in 6 months, hopefully have an employee and do automatic deposit for the payroll.
Cool.
Because that saves everybody a trip to the bank. I never did that when I worked for the state of California years ago. Because the budget
Well,
will not be there, so I don't want any of that. But anyway, 2 years down the road, boy, I don't know what I might want to do or change or.
I don't think I would accept checks personally. A friend of mine who's a locksmith stopped accepting checks. He had thousands of dollars of bad checks. So he, excuse me, uses the Square.
yeah.
And only he's paying a service charge, but through, if you have a membership in Costco or other places, there's a what you call point of sale
Yeah.
service that oftentimes is less percentage.
And you have a peace of mind that the cash is going to get in.
Right.
You don't have to worry about any fraud.
And this isn't in your book, but a cashier's check is still just a check. So even though we get issues where people make fraudulent cashier's checks too, and so don't be careful with those as well if you're accepting it, especially if you're out purchasing like on Craigslist or selling something. So just be careful. It's just a personal PSA that's not in the book. It's just like
The thing is, you can never outthink the criminal who thinks up to how to all these ways of doing this. We're never going to be at that level where we can get ahead of that.
you just gotta be careful. So
Could I quick mention a
Yeah.
little aside here as far as Craigslist transactions? So I volunteer at one of the police substations, and they have in their parking lot, they call it internet safety zones. So it's a section, you know, like reserved parking for handicapped. It says reserved parking for internet safety transactions. So there's, you know, cameras, you know, video.
Can you have a
surveillance.
policeman come out and be standing there with you?
I doubt it. At substations, they really only, they don't have police officers there except for meetings and stuff like that.
Oh.
They do things by central dispatch. But, so there's a sense of safety. I mean, there's no guarantees, but it's
Right.
an option.
Okay.
I have
Yeah,
home
so-
address
Better
at
than
least.
Yeah, they don't have
Yeah.
their home
a
address.
restaurant who offer Wi-Fi, and you don't know who's going to be drinking coffee around you.
Yeah.
So I know exactly what you're talking about.
Sounds like a good idea.
I didn't know that. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
Do all the substations have it?
No, you'd have to check.
Oh,
Check
okay.
with your local
Mhm.
one and see
Very
if they do. It's something fairly recent, so,
That's good to know.
yeah. And of course, the substations are only open 8 to 5, Monday
Right.
to Friday, so if it's a weekend thing, you have a sense of safety, but it's not as much as if it's when the office is open.
So now that you've accepted your payments and you've made all of your payments, you need to reconcile your accounts.
Right.
So going through your bank statement every month, it's not exciting, it's moderately tedious, but very important.
Isn't this what Misty does?
And if
So
you're
I
interested in what Misty does,
hire
she's a
Misty
bookkeeper
in.
and she can do it for you if that's not something you want to do.
I'm just gonna put hire Misty.
But also be careful that you still need a check and balance with your bookkeeper because you need to watch over them
Right.
to make sure they're doing things the right way as well. So a bookkeeper does help and it does provide that sort of time, but also you got to think of ways to make sure you're reconciling what the bookkeeper does.
Right.
So maybe it's your bookkeeper pays all the bills, but then you reconcile the books every month to
But you
make
have
sure.
To know where you are and what
Right.
you have taken in and
Mhm.
where your sales are coming and all of that, right?
Right, exactly.
I mean, if you have that relationship
Mm-hmm.
and you can have those conversations, then you stay better on top of your business for where people are finding you. I mean, all that.
Exactly,
Wouldn't
yeah.
that kind of come about from that
Yeah.
relationship?
Mhm.
Okay.
So, but again, it protects you from fraud, it protects you from errors, it protects you from all sorts of stuff. And you want to make sure the bank, I mean, everybody's encoding and going super fast. Maybe you wrote a check for $1,000 and it went through as $10,000. I mean, those are reasons you want to balance your books every month and reconcile them because there are mistakes other than fraud that happen. People make mistakes.
Yeah.
So maybe you wrote the check for $10,000 and it was only supposed to be for $1,000, and that could be the mistake you discover too. So to avoid fraud, you want to be on guard all the time. Monitor your accounts through online banking. There's other cons that people do to be aware of where they hack into an email and they send it to your banker saying, please wire money. So you just want to be careful and make sure your bank is being careful in certain situations too to protect you. So you want very unpredictable passwords that are super strong, and if you give an employee access or your bookkeeper access, make sure they have really difficult passwords to unlock. So I know it's a pain, but it's really important to make a difficult password for everything you do. Always make sure your computer's on the latest operating system because then it has all of the correct patches, it has all the correct things for any sort of virus. Those things help protect you if you're concerned. And if your business operates on the go, you need to manage your bank relationship remotely. Avoid using the public wireless like we were talking about. Go to the police station. Don't use the Wi-Fi at Starbucks to do your banking.
Yeah, I don't do anything but Google stuff.
So, train and educate your staff to think critically about phone calls. That's something else people will do is they'll phone in. We hear about those scams, or I get calls saying that they're from the IRS and to please call them because you're gonna go into default. I think somebody was pretending to be a P&M coworker and was going around trying to get money that way. So always have your employees either have them call you and then you talk to that person or something. Your bank is never going to send you an email saying, please sign in here with your username and password. It's just never going to happen. So if you ever get those emails, just delete them, and also send them to your bank, because your bank wants to know who's out there phishing, and they will go after the bad guy. The IRS is also doing a similar thing with that scam that was going on. They wanted to know about it so they could go after those people. So if you get a phishing, send it to whoever it's reportedly from, so that they can know. Watch out for fraudulent bills. If you're going to accept cash, get one of those cool magic pens that marks the bills. Okay. Changes colors. Doesn't. And then we talked about checks, being careful accepting checks. That's another way. And maybe you just use a separate computer, one you have that you can Google and use at Starbucks whenever you're there, and then have a separate work computer that has all of your business information on it, so that those two aren't together. And you don't have it available. And that way when you go to Starbucks, you can do other stuff, but just not on your work computer.
Yeah. Definitely.
Some other things to help prevent fraud, like I talked about, was Positive Pay, where you let the bank know. This is kind of if you're somebody who issues 100 checks a month, you want to let the bank know, I issued checks number 100 to 150 today, and these are who they're payable to, and this is the dollar amount. That's a service the bank will offer. And then if those checks come in, and we'll try and catch them and not pay them if it's the wrong check. And also a similar thing with ACH, where you say, I paid all of these vendors via ACH, only accept payments from them. If somebody else plans to debit my account, please notify me. And then they will notify you, and you can either approve the transaction or not. So those are things to sort of keep in your back of your mind, that they're available if you're going to be doing a lot of those types of transactions. Otherwise, it's not very cost effective for like one check here and there. But if you're doing a lot,
as your business grows,
as you do.
This is what you're going to need.
Well, that'll be a whole different thing. That'll be my tiny house building stuff. That'll be lots of.
Oh, I saw afterwards. I saw there was a commission going on for tiny house building that the city's doing. So let me see if I can remember to find. Did you see that?
There was a talk yesterday.
That's what it was. Oh. And I thought of you when I saw it. So
Awesome.
we can talk afterwards.
Here's the contact person.
Okay.
Cool.
Could I add just one thing about when you pay online? You have to be real careful to put in periods and not commas.
Oh, okay. That's how we get that $10,000 we didn't intend.
No, it can happen.
Yeah.
You really have to verify what, after you type in, say 100, whatever, just make sure that that's what actually comes up.
Yeah, because once you hit submit, apparently, there's no going back.
It depends.
Paying your bills online?
Well,
If you don't have the bill, okay, so if you're paying it today for tomorrow, right, it's a lot harder to go back in and correct it. If you're paying it today for the 30th, you have some time to go in and correct it.
There's an option to go and edit it, so you can cancel it right away.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Give yourself a couple days so that you can look at that
and
stuff.
Some companies, they have the technology to receive it automatic. So that's when they take the money out of your account immediately. Because, or in another case, they make a check, like you were saying, to the other party that they're going to receive the funds. So it depends on the technology the company has,
Okay.
or the individual.
Do you know Fida
Mm-mm.
at
Fida-
the Rio
Fida
Rancho?
Marcus, yeah. She's awesome.
Yeah. I've met her before years ago. Is she new accounts over there?
Yes, she
Okay.
is. She is a senior personal banker and,
Okay.
yeah.
I know one, maybe you're gonna get to this, but one protection I found is putting a credit freeze, a security freeze. So with the three credit companies,
Credit bearers.
Experian, you know,
Whatever their
Right.
names are.
yeah, so you can put a block, a security block, security freeze. It costs $5 or $10 to put it on, and then about the same to take it off. But as long as you're not needing it to get credit, it puts a freeze on anybody applying for credit in your name. So that's another protection.
And but next month we go into that more when we talk about credit reporting and management. But yeah.
So
Oh no, thank you.
if
I was just gonna say you're ahead.
you're 65 or older, then it's free.
Oh really? I didn't
for
know that.
putting on a freeze or removing it. So.
That's good to know.
2 more years, and I'll be there.
I'll have to remember that next month or come back so you can share that again.
He's a wealth of information.
Well, so are you. Everybody here is.
I know, I love all this.
So we're going to talk a little bit about commercial lending. We've talked about that in some other classes, but of course that is something your bank can offer. You can apply with your personal information to do a personal line of credit, especially as the company's just getting started. Some people do that. There are business lines of credit and then business term loans. And I've talked about this before, but it's always important to mention it. You should match your credit for what your needs are. So if you're buying a piece of equipment, like a car, you would want a long-term loan that's amortizing with regular payments, not a line of credit. If you need cash because you have to pay your vendors tomorrow for a product you're selling next month, then you would put that on a line of credit because that's short term. You just need to borrow the money for the next month, and that would be a line of credit. So that's kind of one of the biggest things to know is don't put your car on your credit card and then amortize it. You know, that's how it's a quick and easy way to get yourself in trouble. So use your credit needs based on what you're purchasing.
Okay.
And ask when you go and open up a new account. I know Estrella gets questions all the time. How do I get a business loan? How do I apply? And when you open the account, that's a good point just to sort of understand what the bank's credit policy and culture is and what they're looking for, because every bank is a little bit different when it comes to small business lending. And so there are some banks who it's a little bit easier to get a loan from, and it's a small business lender, and there's some other banks that it's a little bit harder. So kind of asking those questions up front. And also start asking what it is you need, like tax returns and those types of things. And going back to that reconciling, because if you have clean records, it's a lot easier to get a loan than it is if your records are kind of in a mess. Banks look at that.
You can't come in with a shoebox.
We are
I've done
not
that.
going to approve your loan on a shoebox.
Yeah.
Then we call Misty and say, Misty, I have a customer with a shoebox.
I did that twice. I got audited twice by the IRS back in the early 80s. And everybody said, take everything in a shoebox. Well, we didn't have much. Took it in a shoebox, gave it to the guy. He looked, he said something, we said something. He said, get out of here, we'll call you, or we'll write you a letter and let you know. We get 4 times more back than, and so I wasn't afraid after that. So the second time I walked in with the proverbial shoebox again. Got way more money back. It was like, I didn't see the IRS problem, but you know, years later and many stories later, I understand it.
One of the nice things about a business credit card, we talked about the risks of a debit card and giving it to an employee. With business credit cards, there's a lot of ways you can manage what the limit is for your employee. So you can say, Misty, who's always out on the road and needs to purchase gas because she's doing deliveries, can have a $500 monthly limit. But Estrella, who's purchasing your equipment, she needs a larger limit of $2,500. So that's the way you can sort of manage some of that risk,
And their
but
name will
still
be on
give
the card
their name is
for-
on the
for
card.
that? And it's all under one account number?
It's all under one account number, and you'll get one big statement at the end of the month with everybody's card purchases. And you can go through and see Misty spent all of her money at the gas station, but then she went to Walmart. Why'd she go to Walmart? And you can ask Misty, why'd you go to Walmart? And she can say, oh, well, I was there buying blah, blah, blah. And you can decide if that was an appropriate business transaction or not. And the same thing with Estrella's credit card. And all of a sudden she's buying gas. Why was she buying gas? Well, Misty ran out of credit, so it kind of...
Okay.
So it's
cool.
a good, and it's a lot better than a business debit card to provide you sort of that ease of being able to have other people do transactions, because you're not going to follow Misty around in the delivery truck all day writing your business debit card to pay for that gas. There has to be a way to do that. And a business credit card's a good way to do that. And then when Misty is no longer there because she went to Walmart, you can just shut the card off. And she no longer has access to the card.
And then you get a different Misty.
And tell the new Misty, don't go to Walmart. And also something to do as a small business, of course, there's SBA lending, which helps provide guarantees. So that's another route to look into as a small business if you're needing funds.
And are they available through the bank?
Yes, typically, and they're also available through what we call micro lenders, which locally is West, Axion, and the Loan Fund. Those are the Loan Fund. Those are three micro lenders that do both SBA and non-SBA loans for small amounts, like $5,000, $10,000. They go up, but they do some of those smaller dollar amounts.
Yeah, and your banker, when they're not able to help you, most like you, they're going to refer you to them, because a good institution should be able to try to help individual, not for only the gain of the institution, but to make it happen for the business owner.
Okay.
So to help improve your chances of getting a loan, there's the 5 C's of credit, which everybody talks about. Capacity, your ability to repay the loan. They're going to look at your cash flow. Capital, do you have some of your own money invested in the company? Do you have some skin in the game? Collateral, what do you have that if for some reason you can't pay us back, the bank can go after and then sell to try and collect? Conditions, how are you going to be using the money? Maybe the bank says you can only use the money to purchase this piece of equipment, and then you can't turn around and use it to purchase your receivables. And character refers to your personal integrity, which kind of goes with, attaching the accurate financial statements, making sure those are clean and you don't bring the shoebox. So that's kind of where that one falls under. And then just some other things, like I mentioned, wealth management and retirement income planning. As you have that $55 million, banks have wealth management departments that can help you figure out what to do with those funds. Also trust departments, where if you want to set that money aside for somebody else, they can help you. So the important thing to remember is to build that relationship with your bank once you've selected it based on sort of what you need. And your banker, again, a good banker should ask you all of these questions when you come to sit with them and say, how are you going to be using it? Not just say you need this, this, and this, but how are you, have that conversation about what your business is, what it is you need, and then try and help you determine if you need merchant services, if that's the right fit or not. And then seeing that person regularly, it helps. I mean, not like every day, you don't have to stop in and say hi, but just checking in every once in a while and saying, hey, this is where my business is going, this is what I'm doing. Those are good conversations. So the next time when you come in to have a loan, your banker already knows what's been happening in your business. So
there are bankers out there that make some of their customers feel like they are intruding in the banker's day if they try to feel like like the customer wants to have that relationship and the banker isn't acting interested.
then maybe that's not the right bank for you.
Okay. I've heard that story a few times from a few people.
Mm-hmm.
So I will just say that if they bring it up again.
Yeah.
When you say bank, that could include credit unions as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So do you guys have any questions about banking and what services banks offer or how to work with your bank? Your bank should be as much a partner and a success in your business as anybody else. The right products can help make it easier, save you time, save you money, and those are all things that a bank should be able to provide for you.
One thing I'm not quite clear about is since the importance you stressed of keeping your personal and business accounts separate,
Mm-hmm.
so shouldn't you automatically apply for a separate tax identification number?
Mm-hmm. Sole proprietors, that's one of the benefits though of being a sole proprietor is that I don't know if it's a benefit, but you don't need to apply for it. That's why it's the easiest one to set up. You use your own personal social security number, you use, it's really just an extension of yourself. But for that protection and for that separation, yes, getting a separate tax ID number is good. And I don't know about LLCs, but maybe looking into an LLC versus a corporation. And in both of those cases, you have to have a separate tax ID number. You can't use your personal.
I think you can apply for it online, can't you?
Yeah.
It's not a big deal.
No, it takes about 20 minutes. But some people perceive it. And it used to be a bigger deal than it is now.
And then you be covered $250 and $250.
There you go.
Yeah.
For that first $500,000.
That's right.
Or the $55 million that's coming.
I wonder, so, can you, let's see, if you, for beneficiary statements,
Mm-hmm.
can you, I think that's important to set up when you set up an account, so, you know, something happens to you, heaven forbid, then you have a beneficiary for that
Mhm.
account, that person. Right?
You
So
can't do that on a business account.
you cannot.
No. On a business account, it's based on the organization of the company. And if you want to add somebody else on as an authorized signer, you can do that. But you can't set up a beneficiary like you can on a personal account.
Like if you have your business, but you have your son who doesn't participate with your business, but let's say you broke your hand and you cannot write checks or something, you can put him ahead of time as a signer to help you out in case of emergency.
Mm-hmm.
But he can't be a beneficiary.
No, but he can take off all the money he wants to
Yeah.
out of the account because he's a signer.
So you have to be careful who you pick as that backup
He
person.
can have access to all the funds.
Well, and then that would go on his credit account as well, so he wants to be sure you're okay. You're selling. That's interesting. Okay.
Are there any other? If you guys just want to fill out the evaluation form at the very back, and that's it for today. It actually went longer than I was anticipating. So
What
it's
time is it?
12:48.
Wow.